It's a victory that we're celebrating today, a victory for our oceans. First, a victory that we're all here together for this third UN conference on the oceans that we co-organize with Costa Rica, taking over from our Portuguese friends. A victory against inertia, indifference when it comes to degradation of our environment, on the trends towards international disengagement. But a victory, a fragile victory, since it requires rapid action, and we cannot afford to move backwards. And this mobilization, it's in itself is a victory because we know what's at stake. And here I want to recall those quickly. In 2024, the 1.5 degree threshold compared to pre-industrial temperatures were exceeded. Ecosystems are threatened. Coral reefs are being bleached at it's never been so fast. Hurricanes, cyclones are more intense than ever, and not just in Mayotte, in Reunion, in our own territories that paid a heavy toll in 2024, and the globe is burning. Our oceans are boiling. Scientists speak of effects that we're having heat waves even in our oceans, and as we have rising sea levels, submersion threatens us. That's why this mobilization is a vital necessity today in Nice, where there are more than 120 countries, more than 50 heads of state and government, 30 heads of international organizations who've traveled here. Has just been mentioned, 100,000 people taking part, with thousands of events being arranged in its context. It's an unprecedented mobilization. Now, the ocean brings us all together in a single ecosystem, which links also climate and biodiversity. GGE reaching the poles, which are leading to rising sea levels, which are now affecting over 3 billion people living in all the world's coastal areas. Plastic pollution in the middle of the Pacific and in canyons of the Mediterranean are polluting a whole food chain, and those who bear the brunt, the primary victims, are the coastal states. The SIDS, small islands. We have our friends here, presidents here, who lead those states and those collectives. There's also the African continent, president here en masse, who are seeing their coasts being eroded, while our seas are a source of economic activity, sustainable food, and don't forget our primary ally against climate change, because our oceans capture 1/4 of the carbon that we emit, much of the heat that we emit. It's a big climate regulator. Our mobilization is therefore crucial, and in the perspective in a few months of the next COP in Belém, President Lula, next to this other great source of the Amazon, which is the cradle of our civilization, and also the Mediterranean lies at the heart of our climate struggle for water, our struggle for food, the environment, climate, for biodiversity. And those struggles are inseparable, and those are the struggles we wage. That's why this conference thanks to your mobilization, achieved its first goal, which is to reiterate the need for the international community to commit in all its components for the battle of the oceans to win. We need to revitalize multilateralism behind the UN Secretary General, and consider the only way to meet that challenge is to mobilize all actors, heads of state and government that will be speaking here, but also scientists who have mobilized, and I want to thank them. There will be no struggle for our oceans unless it's first based on free, open partnership science. Climate, like biodiversity, is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of faith, scientifically established fact. That's why our researchers must be allowed to research freely and establish what's at the heart of our action by adopting new tools, initiatives such as the NEAF Action Plan, but which will also allow us to transform into an international organization Mercator Oceans. We held the first draft in 2022, which will provide an online platform on the oceans, give us a virtual idea of the oceans based on the latest scientific knowledge. EPOS, an interface between science and politics, which will allow states to receive necessary technical support to establish public policy tailored to local context. The Starfish Barometer every year will provide the state of health of the ocean. The Space for Ocean Partnership will bolster international cooperation by connecting the space sector with oceanographic community and place spatial data to the service of ocean protection, and to go even further in exploration and oversight of our oceans as a key indicator. We're launching a new ocean spatial mission called Corsair, and then with the support of all actors, oceanographic studies both at public and private level, with the determination of the EU, will be launching the biggest global ocean exploration mission starting from 2026, the Neptune mission. And rather to hurrying to Mars, before we do that, let's find out our own final border and our best friend, the ocean. That's the goal of Neptune. Mobilize science, therefore, mobilize all local stakeholders on an unprecedented level. 300 elected officials of 5 continents have created, under the behest of Christian Astrosy, the first coalition of cities and regions to combat the impacts of climate change and rising sea levels. That coalition of local actors, co-chaired with the mayor of New Orleans, with whom you have presented your work, is also a mobilization of all actors, local actors throughout the world, of all those who are affected most by the impact of change, but helping us to build on the ground the solutions that we need to avoid and to reduce, offset, adapt on the ground ill conduct and emissions. And it's a question of mobilizing the economic community. And I thank Monaco for organizing the Blue Economy Finance Forum, which helped us launch 200 initiatives, financial facilities with a plurality of actors, which will help us to mobilize the economic sector and finance. And it's also the mobilization of youth, of our NGOs, which on the occasion of this summit, this UN conference, have submitted to us their proposals. They've mobilized and they want to act on an everyday basis with us. The first response, therefore, is multilateralism, mobilization of all actors. Second element is protection of the majority of our oceans and our planet. Just imagine, just until 2 years ago, half of the planet, 2/3 of our oceans, lived without any real international rules. For more than a decade, we fought, and the international community was blocked from obtaining in the high seas, finally, regulation. That is what was signed some months ago with the treaty in England, the biodiversity beyond the BBNJ treaty, which regulates the high seas. That treaty was signed and we mobilized, and I can tell you here that the 50 ratifications already submitted right here in the last few hours, 15 countries formally committed to joining, which means that the political agreement has been achieved, which means that we can say that that treaty on the high seas will soon be implemented. So that is an achievement.
Il aura fallu 12
In 1992, we needed 12 years to do the same with the Convention on the Law of the Sea through that collective mobilization. In just 2 years, we've managed to finally apply that treaty. And all it does, it gives us regulations. It allows us to combat illegal fisheries. It will allow us to protect our oceans in 2/3 of the oceans around the world, around half the planet. The third struggle that we're waging is protecting the seabeds, the high deep sea. We've created a coalition to promote a moratorium on deep sea mining, and I can tell all of you that is a necessity.
Et pourquoi?
And why? I'm not against economic activity, on the contrary, but I think it's madness to launch economic action that's so predatory that will disrupt the seabed biodiversity, that will destroy it, that will lead to carbon being released that we know nothing of, that we can't combat. That's pure obscurantism to have exploitation before exploration. So the moratorium on deep seabed mining is an international crucial need, launching great exploration missions, research, placing science in the front line. But let us protect our ecosystems, because we don't know what might emanate otherwise, because you have key carbon reserves, you have species that no one yet knows about. That struggle is vital for all of us. And I can tell you firmly, the ocean is not for sale. Greenland is not for sale. The Arctic, no other sea is for sale. Fishing licenses for developing countries aren't just to be handed out, no more than scientific data or security of coastal populations. These are not to be sacrificed. We're talking about a common, shared good. We're talking about a work that engages us all. So let's go for it. Another struggle is that of protection of 30% of our seas and lands. That's the struggle that we've waged. We've established in the global framework at Kunming, Montreal by 2030. That goal, we set it together with Rodrigo, starting January in 2021 through the High Ambition Coalition for Peoples and Nature, which brings together more than 120 members and was established at Kunming, Montreal to date since then. Just before this conference, we were at 8% of protected seas, according to the last count. This week will help us, and I'm waiting for announcements. We expect those number of MPAs around the world to expand, but we can't just stay at 8%. The goal is 30% by 2030. France, the second EEZ in the world, will play its full part here. More than 30% of our EEZ is already protected, and we're proud of that, but we must go further. French Polynesia has just carried out made a big announcement. More than 4 million square kilometers, new kilometers, are now protected, of which 900,000 square kilometers are highly protected. And we'll be doing more in the dialogue by bolstering protection action with some of our big neighbors in our overseas territories, because certain scientists also say that it's not enough. We're going to significantly bolster the level of protection for part of those areas through a plan for protection of the seabed, and a map will be presented at this conference. We will now categorize the most sensitive ecosystems, such as canyons, as place them under high protection. Human activity will be even further regulated, some prohibited. Fisheries techniques such as deep-sea trawling and all mining activities will, in those areas which will have been mapped on a scientific basis, together with the fishing sector, these areas will help double now the level of highly protected areas within our EEZ.
Voilà, mesdames et messieurs.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you, all of that. These are struggles that we continue to wage. We must continue to mobilize on the question of plastic. 8 million tons of plastic have been dumped in the sea every year. Discussions are crucial. Will there be a global declaration of mobilization that will allow us, I hope, to mobilize everyone with a view to the next meeting, and we will also try to mobilize in particular within the context of the Mediterranean. But the struggle to limit plastics, to combat plastics at land, at sea, is vital. During this conference, we'll be accelerating decarbonization of maritime transport. Key initiatives have been taken to slow it, to promote new fuels, And I want to welcome the historical agreement of the IMO that was reached a few months ago, which is a genuine revolution and which will help us transform international maritime transport. Besides that, we will continue the struggle to electrify our ports, which is a key struggle because it's 10 to 20% of our emissions. And we must continue the struggle against illegal fisheries. 1 in 5 fish consumed in the world come from illicit fisheries, which is looting, piracy, which is destroying our biodiversity. And here I want to welcome the mobilization of the WTO reaching key agreements that need to be ratified now to fight subsidies to IUU fishing, and thank you to the FAO to bolster its oversight. The WTO and FAO have established a framework together that we must all support and ratify. That's the only way we can create transparency, fight illicit subsidies to that kind of fishery, and eradicate illegal fisheries throughout the world. That is crucial because, as we heard, because that fishery is taking place in the poorest countries, in the seas of states who don't have the resources to protect them. Therefore, it's double looting. They're looting our biodiversity, but they're also looting the fisheries resources of those who haven't the money to defend themselves. So this is yet another injustice that must be addressed. So that's what I wanted to say, my friends, at the opening of this conference. I say it, I speak with passion. I apologize because the struggle for the oceans, it lies at the very heart of all the struggles that we've waged for years for our biodiversity and against global warming and all its consequences, and to improve our environment, to improve health of ourselves and of the planet. Therefore, on each of those pillars we must fight, and I'm counting on you. I began by saying that Nice was a sign of victory, the victory to be here, to be mobilized, but above all today, you will have understood the struggle. I count on each and every one of you over these 5 days to ensure that our humanity can advance, to have a plan of action for the oceans that is as ambitious as possible here in Nice, so that together with my friend, the President of Costa Rica, we can achieve the best possible results, and that on each of those priorities that we're able to move forward together and move our planet forward together. Thank you for mobilization. Thank you for your attention. It's my pleasure now to invite His Excellency, the President Chavez, to deliver a statement. Thank you.